Hello and welcome to Crushing Comics, the series where I fall in love with my comic collection all over again. I'm your host, Peter, and this is my wall of comic books which were wrapped in my home in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but then shipped here to Wellington, New Zealand, and I've got to unwrap them. First of all, because you just can't enjoy the comic books while they're in the wrappers other than as paperweights, but also because I need a little bit of this room back, and they're taking up more space on the shelf wrapped up than they would take if they were unwrapped. So let's get to it. Let's see, who are we going to choose today? I'm going to go fishing here on this low shelf. And there's probably going to be multiple books. So today I'm wearing a comic character t-shirt. I'm not a real big graphic print t-shirt fan, because I'm like, I don't want to be your walking billboard. So I'm not somebody who wears a lot of brands and things on my t-shirts, but this is actually a Moon Knight t-shirt, which I just thought was pretty cool that Marvel had even deigned to put Moon Knight on any kind of merchandise. Boy, would I love to be unwrapping some Moon Knight omnibuses right now. He's a great character. I always say that he's like, he's Marvel's version of Batman, which is funny because Doug Munch, who had created him and written him for many years, was also a Batman author. And Moon Knight was like, you know how Marvel does everything realistically, like Superman on the DC side is this iconic god hero, and then Marvel has like Spider-Man who can't pay his rent. Moon Knight is kind of Marvel's take on Batman. You would think that Iron Man kind of is, because he's like this rich super genius with the suit that can do anything, but Moon Knight really addresses the psychosis of Batman, and that if you were that kind of caped crusader who was out just getting vengeance all the time, that you would be deeply unwell and be a little bit deluded about what your life really is. And future authors actually have explored that with Batman, but that had not really been done in the early 80s when Moon Knight series was running, and I find Moon Knight to be pretty revolutionary based on that, but it also has somewhat hamstrung further creators from telling stories with him, because like how many times can you go back and hit that beat? So a lot of people have really loved his revival in Marvel Now, an all new, all different Marvel, started by Warren Ellis, then written by Brian Wood, Cullen Bunn, and ultimately Jeff Lemire. I have enjoyed some of it, but it's really hard to recapture the magic of the truly insane Batman, Dark Mirror of Batman version that we've seen previously. Let's see what's in these books. No Moon Knight, because there's never been any oversized Moon Knight up to this point. Oh yeah, we got a stack of X-Men adjacent books. Here we go. Oh, good lord. Okay. Alright, this is Uncanny X-Men and Steve Rogers' Super Soldiers. So this is after Second Coming in X-Men, and mutants have kind of defended themselves, and now they're trying to connect to the wider world a little bit again, but it's before Avengers vs. X-Men when that goes kind of south. This is a crossover between 3 annuals, something that Marvel does between annuals and specials to like get some cross-hero action without actually making people buy a crossover during the regular run of the book that would interrupt the arcs that are oh so collectible in trade paperback. So this crossed through Uncanny X-Men Annual 3, Steve Rogers Super Soldier Annual 1, which is kind of funny because that was only like a 5-issue series, but it got an annual, and Namor the First Mutant Annual number 1. But it really also stars a lot of Generation Hope, which was the spin-off book coming out of Second Coming for X-Men that had this new generation of mutants who had been kickstarted by Hope kind of releasing whatever crazy power that she had been storing up. So it kind of functions as a Generation Hope story, and perhaps even a tryout for James Asmus, who wrote these 3 issues, and then also took over Generation Hope from Kieran Gillen for its final arc. This is a fun book. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend going out and picking it up. Ultimately, I really hope they collect all of Generation Hope into its own complete collection, or maybe even an omnibus, and if they did, this belongs with that rather than one with Uncanny X-Men. It has very little to do ultimately with the narrative arc of Uncanny X-Men, much more to do with Hope, although she was a starring character in Uncanny X-Men at the time, so you could go either way. I think the fact that Asmus winds up writing Generation Hope tips the scales for me. So, okay, this is Amazing Spider-Man, Human Torch, which is, it's actually Spider-Man and Human Torch. I have never read this, so I don't know how much I'm going to be able to tell you about it. The interesting thing is that it is by Dan Slott, who has been writing Spider-Man for years and years and years now. So even though it's a sideline series, it's going to have a very authentic Spider-Man voice for you. This was originally, I'm not sure what year this originally came out, but to which I would add that Slott, you know, Spider-Man has this sort of tragicomic tone to it all the time. Peter Parker's expected to be quipping and thwipping, and that's just the way that it is. And you sometimes lose that Slott is actually a really thoughtful, funny writer in a way that transcends the way that he's funny on Spider-Man. You can see the thoughtful bit of it on his run on Silver Surfer, which just wrapped up pretty recently, which is amazing, amazing comic books. But also you can see it when he writes some things like he had a brief ongoing for Thing, he wrote She-Hulk for a while. Slott is a very, very funny author, and so when he does these sort of sideline things, it allows him to open up the throttle on that a little bit more than he would typically on the ongoing of Spider-Man, because he doesn't have to like juggle all the cast and the expectations of Spider-Man. This next book is X-Men Northstar. It's actually Astonishing X-Men Northstar. And this, I do not know why this is an oversized volume. It makes me angry. Astonishing X-Men had been a prestige writer comic book. It started out by Joss Whedon for the first 24 issues in a giant size. It flipped over to Warren Ellis in a series of books that I love that a lot of fans really did not think were very good. I don't understand why. Then there was kind of a brief like, whatever arc by Daniel Way and Christos Gage, and then Greg Pak did an arc that was a backdoor pilot to his Extreme X-Men starring Dazzler, although Dazzler wasn't in the arc itself, it was more about Cyclops. And then Marjorie Liu got on the book. Now, Marjorie Liu is one of my favorite authors. She's a novelist originally, and before that a lawyer, who has done great comics work. She was so good on X-Men and on X-23. Now, of course, she writes the absolutely terrific Monstrous, one of my top indie comics that I'm always happy when it shows up with new issues for me to read. But this was early in her run, and she took Northstar, who was a new member of this team, having kind of been, you know, on and off in X-Men for well over 100 issues at this point, and marries him to his long-term partner, Kyle. Northstar, of course, was famous for being one of the first, if not the first, I'm not sure about that, out gay characters at Marvel, although previously he had just been teased to be an elf, but they actually revised that to him being gay. I guess the two somehow connected in some author's mind. But in any event, there hasn't been a lot of really terrific Northstar material. He tends to be kind of second fiddle in X-Men books ever since like 2003 when Chuck Austin included him in his run. And then he gets like roped into Alpha Flight reboots where he weirdly is also second fiddle, because like why is he back with this small-time Canadian team when he's an X-Man? So this was a chance to really like actually get some Northstar writing, and Lou wrote him well. She writes pretty much everybody well. But again, why is this an oversized book? There are no oversized books previous to it. There are no oversized books after it. It's because I think Marvel was chasing the interest of the book market in the having the same-sex wedding in the book's pages. And the issue is a very good issue, but it's kind of like secondary to the very interesting arc that Lou was writing, which really has a lot more to do with Karma, the character, not the concept, than it has to do with Northstar, if I'm remembering correctly. Now, honestly, I would take all of her run in oversized format because I loved it, and it's pretty good, pretty much right through to the end of it. It has some great moments for Gambit, has some great moments for Iceman that he hadn't had for a really long time. But why the heck is this one volume oversized? You know, I actually, in one of my last orders before we left the States, bought the standard size version of this because I hate that this doesn't fit on the shelf with all of the other collections of Astonishing X-Men. On to X-Men Worlds Apart. This is one where I went in the opposite direction. I have the trade paperback, but I decided why not get the oversized. So this is in the, wow, I'm like the Micro Machines guy right now. Do you remember him? I'm talking so fast. I've learned to breathe. You know, I have all this like singing training and theater training, and I know that like you need the breath to make the noise, but I just want to go like, So, Worlds Apart. This is Storm in the Utopia era of X-Men, but it's Storm on a solo adventure, which she very, very rarely receives. And it's exploring the somewhat fractured relationship that she has with Black Panther, although it's not totally broken at this point. This is a really good comic book, and if you like Storm, the things that I'm going to generally recommend to her is this book, Worlds Apart, and then Greg Pak's 12-issue Storm series from Marvel Now, which was possibly my favorite comic book in all of Marvel now. Looked great, read great, developed Storm fantastically. People didn't read it. I don't know why. Go out and buy it right now. Right now. Like, pause the video. Well, now you can't hear me anymore. Wait to pause the video, go to Amazon or wherever you buy your books and order those 2 Greg Pak Storm books. You're not going to be disappointed if you like Storm. Neither will you be disappointed in this. It's by Christopher Yost, who sometimes also writes as Kyle and Yost with his writing partner. Here he's by himself, and he just is really good at voicing X-Men, although he's actually born to write Spider-Man, and I always pray that he's going to move on to writing a Spider-Man ongoing, but he's actually, I think, scripting some film and TV now, so we might have lost him from the comic world. But this is a really fun series. You get, if you're somebody who really likes Storm to like really use her powers in a huge way, you get some great Storm feats, but it also has some good relationship stuff, and it shows that even though she had relatively recently kind of returned to the X-Men fold from being a Black Panther cast member, that she had some major ideological differences with the X-Men too that continue to play out throughout Gillen's run and far into Marvel now as Storm kind of really became central to the X-Men again. I'm going to hit pause on this right now. Not really pause, you don't hit pause. I'm just saying I'm going to have just done those 4 books, 4 feels like a lot, and then tackle the remaining 3 books in this stack in a subsequent episode. So let's shelve these beauties. This is part of my complete X-Men collection. I have every X-Men comic book, whether it's collected edition or floppy, from 1963 through 2016, at which point I finally decided to let go and let them be digital. So you're going to be encountering a lot of X-Men books over the course of this series. Hope you survived the experience. Okay, here, let's put them on the wall. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Crushing Crisis, and come back next time because I'm going to talk about the next 3 books from that haul, so tune in. Haul. Yeah, I already bought them. They've been bought for several years. I hauled them off the shelf where they nearly like fell on me and killed me, but the next 3 books from that haul.